Hey guys, welcome back to the Another Excuse podcast, where we chat to founders, creators, and self-starters about how they started and where they are now. Today's guest is Mbulelo Jili, the founder of The Local Agency. The Local Agency specialises in assisting tech businesses in establishing a strong presence in Africa. We have a really interesting conversation about what the local agency does and how it all started, about mentorship and how it's influenced Mbulelo's career. We talk about marketing in Africa and why it's so unique. And we talk about fears and insecurities and life in general. It's a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure you will too. Enjoy the show. Hi, Mbulelo. Thanks for joining me today. I'm really excited to get into TLA and how it all started. But first, could you give us a bit of background on who you are and your journey that got you to where you are today?
Yeah, definitely. So I started off in advertising about 10 years ago. Um, I started off as a junior project manager, and I worked my way up to a senior project manager. And then I worked with a few agencies, some companies. I worked with some companies in South Africa, as well as some agencies in London. And yeah, I became a senior account manager after doing project management after a number of years, and then I became an account director. Uh, and I think that's a bit about my background in terms of like where I started off in advertising until I ventured off and started doing my own thing. And Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's my background in terms of like what I've done over the years in terms of like my professional work.
And then you mentioned you started your own thing, and that's the local agency. What
Yeah.
do you guys do?
So at the local agency, we're an ad agency. We specialize in assisting tech businesses from inside and outside Africa in expanding their reach across the continent. We with a focus on market research, brand strategy, and consulting. We offer invaluable insights and guidances to our clients. We help them tailor these strategies that resonate with local audiences.
And what gave you the idea to start the company?
Yeah, so that's actually a funny story. I was working with an e-hailing company in they were a Russian e-hailing company, and they were expanding into the African market. They started in Southern Africa and they were going up east and west. And our the agency I was working with, they had won the account, and we were expanding into Dar es Salaam specifically. That's where we were gonna do the campaign launch. And we worked months on months on curating this campaign. And the first phase of the campaign was for us to do a below the line execution. So it was a below the line execution. So we were doing like these leaflet drops in like major intersections because it was an e-hailing app. So we were going to like a lot of like the local taxi ranks and stuff, as well as like malls. And we'd printed like thousands of like these leaflets. And we'd got like a local like activations company to assist us in terms of like handing out all these leaflets at these major intersections. And I remember having a conversation with one of the promoters and asking them, hey, like, why do you seem to be struggling with like handing out these leaflets? Um, and he basically broke it down to me, and it was quite like a little profound moment. He was like, well, look, in terms of legislation, like, the official language in Tanzania is English, but like a lot of the locals actually don't speak English, you know, especially at these intersections that we're at. Most of them just speak Swahili. And I think like a light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, we spent so much time, working with this company in Russia, as well as like we had collaborated with a few partners there, but something as small as like knowing the fact that the language on the ground is in English and it's actually Swahili, if we would have taken our time to work on copy that was translated into Swahili and that resonated with local audiences, we would have had a much better outcome. They would have been able to handle a lot more leaflets, and we definitely after that experience, I really wanted to figure out what's the disconnect between you know what's the disconnect between the people sitting in the boardroom curating these amazing strategies and these campaigns, and the people that are physically on the ground.
And that's so fascinating, and it's so obvious that there's like each culture and each place within Africa is going to need to be communicated with differently. But so you saw this problem, but what gave you the confidence that you could go off and solve this problem and start your own agency?
For the most part, you know I think it's representation. Seeing people like me succeed in spaces like this, as well, like locally as well as internationally. Mentors. Um, I've really been fortunate and lucky to have some good people in my life and in my corner throughout the years. Even though they might have been in different spaces, um, they really seeing people succeed that look like me instilled the level of confidence in myself that I could go out and try solve this problem. I obviously don't have all the answers, but um, I think with this issue, I definitely think I found a way to address the problem. Um, with our brand clarity model and working with people on the ground in places like Dar es Salaam, and having a network of people in Lagos, as well as Nairobi, people that are physically on the ground that are going to be helping us with the market research, and really telling us like how people feel on the ground about certain products, and certain technologies and stuff, and having people in those universities to help us craft our strategies. I think it's really gonna reflect in terms of like how we put together a finished product to our clients when we when we deliver the research, or we help them build the skeleton out to communicate to their audiences. I think we've we've definitely cracked it in terms of like having people physically there that will help us craft these nuanced kind of strategies and approaches to communicating effectively with the people that we're trying to talk to.
So I heard you touch on mentors and how they impacted your career. Did you go out searching for mentors, or did it sort of just happen naturally?
Actually, no. I'd say for the most part, it gradually happened like naturally. If somebody, they were my seniors in the company, the agency I was working at, and they kind of basically just took me underneath their wing. I think maybe in a way they saw themselves in me, um, and they wanted to help guide me and shape me. Um, until today, like I'm still in great like comms with a lot of them, but I also do currently do seek out mentorship now as well. Um, I work with um, I work with a few platforms where I do mentorship for like I work with University of Cape Town and another platform called Meta, where I do some mentorship, where I help young students, as well as young professionals like that are starting out in their careers. And also on that same platform, Meta, uh, I also uh, I also look and seek mentorship on the platform, which is really nice. There's a few guys that I've been talking to on the platform, and we do catch ups like once a week. I tell them where I currently am and like some of the things that I want to achieve for the week and stuff, and they just give me some insights and guidance. And it's mostly about just having bouncing your ideas off somebody and maybe them giving me just a different perspective on how to look at the problem and like how I can address it and try to solve it. But yeah, I'd say it's a combination of both. Like some of it happened naturally, and over the years I've gone out as well to seek mentorship from somebody that's done something. It might not necessarily even be in the same field, um, but somebody that's been successful in business. Um, because I feel like a lot of the principles for success are pretty much the same. Discipline, consistency, hard work, um, and they always offer like a a good perspective for me to kind of like look at the problems that I'm trying to currently solve.
Yeah, I can imagine. Mentorship and speaking to someone who's been through those experiences before can be so extremely helpful. And so, why and how is it different marketing in Africa?
I think for the most part, it's diversity. Africa is incredibly diverse. It like comprises of like numerous countries, cultures, languages, economies. Marketing strategies need to account for the diversity and adapt to the different cultures and the norms, as well as the languages and the consumer behavior across all the different regions. In Africa alone, I think there's just over 3,000 like ethnic groups, and over 2,000 languages. So you can imagine like you speaking to a whole bunch of different people, and how you talk to each group is obviously going to be very different. Also, I think because of the infrastructure and the connectivity in Africa, that's also something that you really need to consider. Um, there's like the way you might communicate to somebody living for example, in the Eastern Cape, that's living somewhere where they might not have Wi-Fi, is going to be totally different to the way you communicate to somebody that's living in Cape Town that has access to Wi-Fi. So that's definitely something that you also need to take in consideration in terms of like how you build your marketing strategy and the channels that you would try to communicate with those people. Is definitely something you need to take in consideration, and like how you would approach that. Are we going to do like below the line executions where people can physically see us? Are we going to do like pop-ups with our branding? Or are we going to do a digital route? We're going to run digital ads, and that person's is going to be able to interact with us there.
What do brands usually miss when launching a campaign in Africa?
I think for the most part is they don't understand like how incredibly diverse Africa really is. Um, they especially a lot of the bigger brands, when they do come here, they kind of like blanket Africa, so they'll put together an ad strategy and go, okay, cool, this is how we're going to talk to everybody in Africa, and they'll use one model, and then they don't understand why it doesn't necessarily translate, um, and it doesn't necessarily like resonate with the people on the ground, because what you've done is you've put everybody into one box, and you think everybody should fit into that box, but it doesn't work like that. The way you speak to somebody that's living in South Africa is not the same way you're going to speak to somebody that's living in Zim. Even though they're neighbors and stuff, the way you approach your strategy needs to be totally different. Even within South Africa, the way you're going to market a brand in Cape Town is different to the way you'd market the brand in, let's say, for example, in the Eastern Cape. Do you know what I mean? Because they're two different people. And yeah, like the outlining principles are going to be the same, but the way you talk to them is totally different, because they're different groups of people. Their interests are different. The way they consume products is
Yeah,
different.
that makes perfect sense. And I'm sure it can be a very expensive mistake to make if you sort of
Yeah,
miss
definitely.
that and don't communicate with the right people in the right way. So
Yeah,
how
definitely.
does your brand clarity model work?
So the brand clarity model is it's a purpose and values. Basically, it's a strategy where we try. define why the brand exists at its core and what its principles are. Um, we also craft a clear and unique proposition for the customer, and we identify the brand's distinct place in the market. And we also define the human traits that are associated with the brand, and we create a compelling narrative uh, that connects us with our consumer. Um, and then we also try to develop assets that align with those people, and we try then build a real relationship with that person. So what we do is we basically do research, and then we build a model around the people that we're trying to talk to. We let the people tell us who they are, and then we reverse engineer that to try craft a very like clear understanding of who are the people we're trying to talk to. So we define why the brand exists at its core, and then we do a very clear, unique value proposition to really understand who the person is, um, and then we create a model around that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And how do you go about doing your research? Like, what different types of research do you do when a large company wants to launch a campaign?
Yeah, definitely. So we do a number of different things, depending on where we are. You know, sometimes you can pull information from online, and then sometimes we pull information. We do surveys, and then sometimes it's physically maybe. So we did some research now actually for a fitness app, and we got most of our information online. But then we also conducted like surveys on the ground where we physically spoke to people in gyms. Um, we went to all the major gyms in South Africa. So we went to all the Virgins, we went to all those Infinites, and then we also went to some of like the smaller independent gyms as well. And we went around and we asked people how they felt about fitness. So I think we take a very practical approach when it comes to research. We really try to figure out like what's our end objective, like why are we conducting the research in the first place, like what are we really trying to understand, and then we try to take a very practical approach, where we pull from like multiple different resources, you know, using online resources as well as like speaking to people on the ground. And then I also work with people in the university. um, I have worked with some people at the University of Cape Town, and I they're researchers, and I basically also just lean on them as well. And some of the research that they currently like, they've got heaps of information as well, and they also help me in terms of like understanding what I'm trying to do. So, yeah.
Now, your process is broken down into 5 steps, namely brand audit, brand immersion,
Okay.
opportunity planning, execution, and sustainable care. Could you walk us through each of these steps and explain why each one is important?
Yeah. So a brand audit. This is a step that involves like evaluating and analyzing the current state of the brand. It includes like assessing the brand assets, the market position, the brand perception, the strengths, its weaknesses, and identifying areas for improvement. It's crucial because it sets the foundation of understanding where the brand stands in the market, and it also enables the formulation of like effective strategies to enhance its position. So that's a brand audit. It's basically just trying to figure out where the brand currently stands and how people kind of like perceive it. And for a brand immersion, uh, the team in this phase, the team deeply immerses itself in the brand and its ethos and its values and its identity. It involves like really understanding the brand's history, its culture, its target audience, um, and its competitive landscape. This step is essential as it helps align the teams with the core essence of the brand, ensuring that all the strategies and innovatives initiatives align with its identity. So in this phase, it's really in this phase, it's like really the team really trying to understand the brand and who it really is, and how it aligns itself um, with the market. And then you also said,
Opportunity planning.
Opportunity planning. Oh, um, okay. Once the brand's current state is assessed, its essence is understood. In this phase, it involves identifying opportunities for growth and improvement. Um, it's about developing a strategic kind of like roadmap that leverages the brand's strengths as well, addressing some of its weaknesses in the market. This step is crucial as it sets the direction and the goal for the brand's evolution. So basically, it's like the opportunity phase in terms of like really trying to identify like where the opportunities really lie for the brand. Um,
Great. And then the execution phase, I think, is self-explanatory. But could you
yeah,
touch
yeah.
on the sustainable care part too?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like after executing the strategy, this step really goes on into kind of like monitoring and measuring and redefining and maintaining the consistency to the change in the market and gathering in feedback. Like so, once all the stuff has gone out, and yeah, you guys have you've launched this campaign. It's more about like now trying to get feedback and ensure that there's this consistency uh, from the steps taken previously to make sure like you keep growing this thing and you guys keep monitoring the progress and you kind of like nurture it to ensure that you guys continue on the right path.
Right. That makes sense. And how did the business come about? Was it something that you started on the side in your while having your full-time job, or did you just quit and dive right in?
No, no, no. So yeah, I took it kind of like slowly. I started the agency like while I was working on like side projects. Really trying to figure out, is this something that the market needs? Is this something people want to see? So that's how I started it. I started very slowly, and we're still very small. Like we're only I think like 8 9 months in now, or officially 8 9 months in. That's what's on LinkedIn, but it's probably about a year now because uh, I registered the business about close to about a year ago. But yeah, it's something I started on my part time, and I slowly just grew it. And I've been taking on like small projects, mostly from word of mouth and my network.
Right. And uh, did did you have any fears starting the business? Because I can imagine running the business or starting it while in your full-time job sort of alleviates some fears. But even when you decided to take that leap, did you just have confidence in the idea, or were there fears too?
Yeah, of course, there's a lot of fears. I thought, like I always thought, the ceiling might come falling on me at any moment. Like, when you do start a business, unfortunately, like entrepreneurship is very difficult. Like, you spend most of it just spending money. Like I spent the last probably the first 6 months like just spending money on like resources. Um, Trying to get a hold of the right researchers, building a database of researchers, help getting guys to help me with building copy assets, um, getting somebody to help me with like the social media bits, getting somebody to help me maybe craft like an article. So for the most part, I've spent the last 6 months just spending money. And obviously, because of that, that comes with a lot of fears. It's like, um, I know the market needs something like this, but at the same time, you don't know if people are gonna buy into you, and those are like my own fears, I guess. Like I'm doing this thing, but do are people really going to want to work with me? Are they not going to want to work with me? And I think maybe these are all just natural fears, but yeah, definitely, I think there was a lot of fears going into starting the business.
And you seem very busy. Do you have time for yourself at the moment, or is it just go, go, go right now to get the business off the ground?
I don't really have a lot of time for myself, to be honest. I spend most of my time just working. Like I sleep next to my laptop. I sleep next to my laptop most days. Like I'm always online. And it's difficult at this very moment. But I think as a business grows and and I can put people around me to alleviate some of the pressures, I think I will get a little more time to myself. But at the moment, as we're trying to build and grow and stuff, it's just go 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 at the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. And most of the time at the start of a new
Any bit-
project or new business, it everyone knows it's not a long term commitment, like extremely long term, but you know it's necessary for right now. And you've got to do it. So I really respect that. And what are the most valuable lessons you've learned so far?
in business, I think probably patience, and trusting yourself and your intuition. Um, so trust yourself, and you really trust yourself in what you're currently doing. Because sometimes I think you second guess yourself quite a bit, but trust yourself and trust your intuition, and also trust the work that you've put in, um, and hopefully it then resonates with people. I think at the end of the day, I think it's all about, like, putting it all out there, and then leaving everything else that's out of your control to work itself out. Yeah, so I think maybe it's a combination of that, like, trusting yourself and also being patient with the process.
I think that's a very important lesson. I think many people have inklings for ideas or believe they could or think they could do it, but they don't have enough self belief to actually take action. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
taking
definitely.
taking that leap is so important.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's probably the most important thing, is like just taking the leap. Just just jump, because nobody's done life twice before. We're all just doing this thing for the first time, you know. Um, so I don't think anybody truly has answers for anybody. You're the only person that can really answer uh for yourself what you need and what the things that resonate with you. Um, so take the leap and then see where you land.
I think that's a great perspective to have. And what would you say is the one thing that you're working on at the moment?
I'm really working on, like, I think shutting on some of the voices of insecurity. Because sometimes you can you can be insecure about a few things that I'm currently dealing with, like lacking some. I have insecurity sometimes in terms of, like, believing in not necessarily myself. I believe in who I am and things that I'm doing, but sometimes it's the big deal. Can I take on a project worth 100 million, or can I take on a project that's worth 50 million? And sometimes I have to trust myself. Even it's very different when you've worked on a project worth 20 million and it's for somebody else. I think when you work on a large deal for your own capacity, I think sometimes they can be like an inkling of like self-doubt, you know. But that's something that I've been working on, like trying to quiet the noise, um, and really backing yourself. And then I think maybe it's also, it, I think it's easy sometimes to shut down some of those voices when you've got a proven track record. You're like, okay, I've done this for this company. I'm sure I can do it for myself, kind of thing. But yeah, sometimes some of those voices do creep in.
Yeah, like that, the case of imposter syndrome. I think it creeps in no matter what stage of your career you're at.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you there. It doesn't matter. I think even though sometimes I've worked on a project, you've worked on something 100 times. Sometimes that voice does come back in, and it creeps in, and it starts nicking away at you in a way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But like you said, it's just the undeniable proof that you can do it. So you just got to keep looking back and do your track record and telling yourself that
Yeah,
you've done this before, you can do it again.
yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and have you considered yourself an entrepreneur your whole life, or is it something that you developed over time?
Well, to be honest, when I saw this question, I thought to myself, like, I've always, I guess, seen myself as a bit of an entrepreneur. Like, I used to sell lollipops, like, in primary school and throughout high school. So in a way, yeah, I guess I have always seen myself as an entrepreneur. I've always, because I come, back home. I've always kind of always had to have a job because of the situation that we were in. So I've always looking at different ways I could get more money. So in a way, I think I've always been an entrepreneur, but there's obviously a certain level, set of skills that I've had to develop over the years, to become better at it. But yeah, in a way, I think I've always kind of seen myself as an entrepreneur.
And have you made any mistakes along the way? And if so, what did you learn from them?
Yeah, I definitely have made like hundreds of mistakes. Um, the one thing is maybe I'm learning is being a better communicator, because sometimes you have an idea, and it's not necessarily the ideas might be the right idea, but learning how to effectively communicate that idea to a team of people, um, can be tricky, because sometimes what I tend to do is I keep the ideas in my own head and I expect people to understand it, because in a when you're running something small and you're trying to scale it, you need people to jump in and get it immediately, and get things moving. um, but it doesn't always translate like that. I think you've gotta be patient and a lot more effective when communicating with others, especially when you're trying to get them onto the same page with you. Um, I think that's something I'm definitely trying to learn now, is like be a much more effective communicator, in terms of like the way I communicate my ideas, and sometimes how I need people to execute things. Is that's definitely something that I'm learning now.
Great. Yeah, thanks. That's a great example. And what advice would you give someone considering starting their own business?
Just do it. Uh, I think there's always gonna be an excuse why you shouldn't do it, and your excuses are probably valid. But that also doesn't negate you from actually doing what needs to be done. If you want to create a business and you want to go out and and achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve, your excuses are valid, but that also doesn't negate you from taking the responsibility of going out and actually doing that thing. Because you know 5 years will go by in a blink of an eye, and if you're still in the same situation that you're currently in, then who's actually to blame except for you? You need to take responsibility. You need to take responsibility for your life, and execute. I think that's probably the most important thing. I think, this is an idea that I've been like juggling with in my own head. There's a big difference between knowing what to do and the execution bit. Like like knowing what how to do something and actually doing it are two different concepts.
Definitely. I've been caught in that trap many times before where you've watched endless YouTube videos and listened to all the podcasts on the topic, and you you know all the theory, but you're
Yeah,
still very fearful about actually taking that next step. And you're only going to really know how to do it once you actually do it. It doesn't really matter if you know it in theory. It's like you haven't done it yet.
exactly. I think the one thing that I would, the one piece of advice I'd give anybody: just do it. Like you have to do it, and it's okay to make mistakes along the way. You will learn as you grow. Um, but you've just got to do it. There's nothing else. Like thinking you know how to do it and doing it are like such. And I think for the longest time, I think I was watching an interview with I think it was Kevin Hart and like Jay Z or whatever, and Jay Z gave a really good analogy of like he was talking about like how we started out in business, and like how everybody would be telling him like, yo, this is the way you should do it. But a lot of people don't really understand there's a big difference between talking about doing something and actually doing that thing that you're talking about consistently and doing it well at a high level. So yeah, I think the
Yeah,
one advice I'd give is just do
definitely.
it.
I agree. And
Yeah.
what are your goals for the local agency? What's the long-term plan?
The long term plan, I want to expand out. I want us to be the go to agency. I want us to be the go to agency for tech companies in terms of helping, especially companies that are coming outside of Africa and within Africa. So if you're, I don't know, you're Uber, for example, we want to be your trusted partner to help you understand the local landscape and be your partner that gives you the tools and the information for you to also better understand the landscape and how you need to operate in the landscape and how you should be effectively communicating and talking to these people. We want to be the go-to kind of like caveat in Southern Africa as well as East Africa and West Africa. So the long term goal is set up shop here, um, be the go to, be the go to agency to help tech brands kind of like understand the market, and then hopefully also become a big player in East Africa and West Africa.
Awesome. And to end every episode, I give my guests the opportunity to ask me a question. Do you have a question for me?
Yeah, like what what inspired the podcast?
So what inspired it was um, sort of this, what we've been talking about a bit earlier about having ideas, watching all those videos, and the gap is actually, but like the
Yeah,
gap between actually seeing something come into being and learning about it is that action step.
yeah,
And I wasn't taking action, and I had an idea for this podcast, but I wasn't taking action. Um,
yeah,
and I was worried that was going to become one of those ideas that sort of fizzled out, and it was becoming a self-identity issue. And so I
yeah,
was like, screw it, I just need to start. But I also want to learn about like entrepreneurship and business in the
yeah,
meantime, because that's something I want to aspire to do and like start my own businesses and stuff. So why don't I speak to people who've done it and also hold myself accountable by having an episode every week? And then it sort of creates this flywheel effect where I'm constantly learning from other people and at the same time actually doing something and growing something that could become something, if that makes sense. So it was a kind of a meta approach into starting my own thing.
yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. I think it's very, you know, I think really like, when you say that, I think nothing beats just taking action, like really just going out and doing something. Because I think too many of us get so caught up in the in the what could go wrong, and we stop and we don't look at what could go right. Um and I know I totally understand, like, you've when you're doing anything, I think it's very important to kind of do due diligence, and you try to look at the problem from all different angles. But you can't you can't psych yourself out into not doing something because of what you think could potentially go wrong, or what if this thing doesn't work out. Like, rather just do it and figure out, like, is it gonna work or not gonna work. Because I really think no one's ever done life, so I think we're all still trying to figure it out. So, like, no one's got answers for you. I think, like, that's very commendable that you took the initiative, and you went out and you started this thing.
Yeah, thanks. And that's like one thing I've learned is that the taking action part is the most important thing to learn. But just like everything, and that's like undeniable proof and imposter syndrome, it's all about just proving to yourself that you can do it. And so I've created this little sort of microcosm of taking action, but I've seen the results and like me getting connected with people like yourself and the benefits of it, and like my speaking improving and stuff. And so there's obvious benefits of taking action. So if you have a feeling or an inkling that like this may be something worth pursuing, there's no harm in giving it a go for like 3 months. And also learning that you don't want to do it is just as valuable of a lesson as finding out that you want to do it.
That's very true, right? Like, at least it tells me, okay, this is not the direction I want to go in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But if you don't go in that direction,
you're not
it'll
gonna
always
know.
be that thing in the back of your mind wondering like, what if I went down that path and
Yeah.
And then you could also inflate that idea and it could be this like dream outcome in your head. But if you
Yeah.
just started it a couple of years ago and realized after 3 months that it's definitely not, you have way more confidence in like the direction you actually are heading in.
Exactly. It's like not asking the girl out when you should have just asked out and let her say no, and then at least you know it would have never worked out in the first place, right?
Yeah, exactly. But now you're wondering, oh, what if? And like, maybe
What
we would
if?
have been married. And then you start having all these
Yeah.
ideas and stories in your head. But she would have said no right then and there, like a few years ago.
Yeah.
So it's like,
It's
yeah,
exactly
that's a
that.
great example. Well, thanks for joining me today, Mbulelo. I really enjoyed our conversation and learning about the local agency. If people want to find out more about you guys and yourself, how can they do so?
They can follow me on LinkedIn. My name is Mbulelo Jili on LinkedIn. They can follow me on LinkedIn, and they can also follow the local agency on LinkedIn as well, to find out about where we are. Or they can just or they can give me a shout out on my email address, info at the local agency .org, or mbulelo at the local agency.org.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks for joining me, Mbulelo. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you making it all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode. One more quick reminder before you go. I have a weekly newsletter by the same name, Another Excuse, where I cover 4 topics: something that has changed my perception, a tool that could be useful to you, content that is actually worth consuming, and a concept that I try break down and explain. If this sounds of any interest to you and you need a kick up the arse, then you can subscribe at the link below. Thanks for joining me again, and I'll see you next week.